So welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. On today's show, we'd like to introduce you to Noor Kidwai, who is a comedian, podcaster, and seeker. As seen on CBC and heard on Sirius XM satellite radio, comedian Noor grew up in the small farming town of High River, Alberta, which was basically the first place he began doing comedy. So he has sharp writing combined with a background in improv, which makes him quick on his feet. So it's going to be a great conversation today. So he lives in Toronto and tours all over Canada and the UK. He has performed at Just for Laughs 42, the Winnipeg Comedy Festival, the Seattle International Comedy Competition, and the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland. Some amazing venues there for your comedy. So we're really grateful to have you on the show today, Noor. Thank you for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited for this.
I think you are officially the second comedian we've had on the show.
But the first active comedian.
Yeah, exactly. But one was more kind of hobby, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super excited to get to know you a little bit more, Noor. So could you please just share with us and with our listeners a little bit more about who you are from your own standpoint and your own perspective rather than the classic bio?
Yeah, the classic bio. I remember just listening to the bio. I'm just like, God damn it, I don't like that. I don't know why.
It's necessary, but there's always another perspective, right?
Yeah. Honestly, comedy has always been my love. I started doing improv in high school, and I used to watch, like, my dad. I grew up with my dad and my mom, but my dad was like that authoritarian, like East Indian, the Pakistani dad who had to like control every part of your life. But like the one time he always turned off is when we watched Chris Rock together, and we would watch his specials, and like we would both start laughing. And I remember looking over at him like, how the heck is this guy like laughing at these raunchy jokes? And like he just never laughs at all ever in life. But like it kind of showed me like how powerful comedy is, that it can just like break through somebody's like tough exterior they put on and like really just get to the heart of who they are. And like that's where I kind of fell in love with it. I never really thought like I would ever be able to do it until I kind of started doing it after I graduated high school. And once I first like stepped on stage, it was kind of like, okay, this is it. And I just really kept pushing for it like afterwards. And like the one thing I love about it is like over the years, like comedy became kind of like a spiritual practice to me, because like I had to kind of learn how to face my anxiety, face my fears, kind of really dig into myself and like try to understand like who I am, why am I doing this, why am I writing this, like why do I have anything interesting to say, like all of those things like became like a spiritual practice to me. And that's kind of where that's kind of the reason I started my podcast, like God, Yay or Nay, which is like kind of me, like kind of seeking as well and like learning to become like whole and stuff, is because that's kind of been like my been pretty much who I am since I started into comedy. And like, you know, it's got me to meditation, into yoga, into like ayahuasca, which has been really big for me as well, and like breath work and just like certain stuff. And like, you know, like all of that's kind of like been just who I am now, and just trying to like continue down that path. And like the more I continue down that path, I learn more about myself, and like my comedy gets better. So I think that's just a good deal, I guess. But yeah, I don't know, I think that's probably a better way of kind of like letting people know who I am, just what I'm about.
Nice. Absolutely. So the whole obviously that connection to kind of your comedy and spirituality for you, what was there like a pivotal moment within your life that you kind of got to where you found spirituality, or was it like a gradual awakening to that, or was there like a pivotal moment when you think, okay, this like I didn't realize this, or like I didn't know anything about this, and it started to kind of connect those dots for you?
Yeah, well, like I think deep down inside of me, I've always like had that idea that your mind is more powerful than what we kind of like give in society, right? So like I always had that idea deep inside of me. So I think I was always drawn to stuff like meditation and like Eastern philosophy because of that. But like even when I was younger, I didn't dip into it too much. But I think there was like a moment when uh I used to just have horrible like stage fright when I was starting doing comedy. And I remember I was told by somebody like to do some like breathing exercises just to slow down your breath before you get on stage. And like when I started to do that, and I noticed that my anxiety would drop a little bit, like before I got on, like it was still very present and like very debilitating, but at the same time, like I would do it before I went on stage, and it like actually would like drop my anxiety a bit and like give me a little bit more peacefulness before I went on stage. And that right there kind of just made me go like, okay, like these things you can control a little bit, you have more control. And that I think there was like a really big like shift in me where I was like started being like, okay, like in my head I was kind of like, if I master enough of these things, like I'll be unstoppable. Like I gotta notice now, like over time it's not really like that, but just having these kind of techniques and stuff, like it can make a huge difference.
I think it's so powerful, kind of like what you said there, when you start to do those breathing techniques and you just everything slowed down a bit and you influenced your anxiety. It kind of dropped a couple of levels. And I think if everyone realized, oh, when you do something uncomfortable, especially stepping out on a stage in front of people, I think it's probably one of like everyone I think we come across, it's one of the most terrifying things people say is speaking in front of people.
Like, that's what the research shows. It is like the number one thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we realize that that response when you're about to do something like that, that's your stress response, and that's okay because that helps to keep you focused, present, and it makes your senses heightened. But the problem becomes when we let that experience or those sensations become too intense and it overwhelms us. And then we start thinking, what if I forget what I'm going to say? What if people don't like what I'm going to say? Or what if this happens? What if that happens? We start creating realities that haven't happened yet. And then when you start to breathe like you did, you start to bring that intensity back down to a more manageable level where that stress response becomes more healthier. You're using that energy now for something to become more focused when you're about to step up. And even though it is still scary, it's exciting as well. It's that kind of fine line. You're balancing on a tightrope between excitement and like extreme fear. And if you let it go and extreme fear takes over, is when that kind of paralysis tends to happen, and you forget everything you're going to say, and you forget what you're going to do, and everything just becomes a complete nightmare at that point.
And like I like how you said like extreme fear and excitement, and like that was one thing I learned later on in my comedy career, was just like how close those two things are together. And it was one of the things I used to do then before. It's like rather than like really trying to calm down my anxiety, it would be more like just switch it over to excitement. So like, you know, when you have anxious thoughts or when you have that feeling of anxiety, then you know what anxious thoughts come with it. Like, oh, are these people gonna like me? Am I gonna remember my jokes? Am I like, you know, all like, why am I even here? I could be at home eating a sandwich, like all of that shit. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'd love just eating at home. That's like, I'd rather just do that. But like, you know, it's like, this is why I'm doing this. So like, it was like, no, turn that anxiety into excitement. And like, it's very like, they are very related feelings. And like, if you can master that, like, and like for me, it was just kind of pumping myself up. Like, and rather, I'll just be like, all right, no, I want to do this. This is going to be fun. And I kind of start jumping around a bit, trying to get the energy moving through my body. Cause you like, you could know when like you have anxiety, sometimes it's just like a really intense feeling, but it's in a few spots in your body. So with me, I would kind of like jump up a bit, like get that energy moving and go like, no, this is going to be fun. This is going to be great. And like, you know, I sometimes like shadow box, like I just do stupid stuff, but it's like, get that energy moving, get it turned into excitement. And it like, that's been one of my best like tricks lately. Because like I used to try to like really calm myself down as much as I can before, which was great. But at the same time, it you know, like it kind of takes away the energy out of my performance because I go on stage too calm. So with this way, it's like I got that energy with me, and I'm just like kind of more excited to be on stage, and that's like a way better feeling, and I think the audience can feel that too. Like even if it's unconscious, but they'll connect with you better.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting as well because, you know, the excitement and anxiety essentially is the same chemical mix that we're experiencing. It literally is the narrative that we are attaching to it that is going to determine then what you do with that energy. So I love how you've learned to channel that. I think that's beautiful and super powerful for anyone listening as well to really recognize that, because like you know this better than anybody probably as a comedian, your words have the power to just shift somebody's internal state drastically. And just tell us a little bit about that. Actually, if you tell us about perhaps a time where you've had somebody in the audience, and I just imagine this is what it's like as a comedian, because I'm definitely not a comedian as much as I like to think I am sometimes. A classic example right there. Which is the perhaps you got somebody in the audience and like everybody else is laughing, but there's just like maybe this one guy or one girl that's just sitting there with like the straightest face. Have you experienced that? And then do you kind of make it your mission to try and shift that person, or
yeah, that's it happens all the time. I think every comic like gets into this like when you see just one person, you're gonna be having the best show, but that one person, you're just like, that son of a bitch. Like then you're just like sitting there like focused on them, like I'm gonna get this guy. And when you get them, like it's a good feeling. Sometimes you just have to like sometimes might even go and talk to them now, like now it's like I'm at a point where I'm just like super comfortable. So like it's when you're super comfortable on stage, like it's the one like beauty is like when you can like have your like when you don't have any of that anxiety or any of that stress going when you're on stage, like you can feel the audience a lot more and you start having the senses. So like you can feel like, oh, like this part of the room isn't on board, but like this part's just like love the room's loving me, or like you're like, okay, now I got the whole room like paying attention. And like you can feel the differences in silence when a crowd's completely silent. There's like differences in that. You can feel like, oh, this crowd is silent right now, but they're so engaged and they're listening to every single word I'm saying, or this the crowd's silent and they're not engaged at all and they're not they tuned out kind of thing. So like you can feel that with a person too. Like sometimes you have the whole audience loving you, but you feel this like like this one guy right here is just like just hated you. But like I do sometimes make it my mission. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's one ego thing too. It's just like you're like I'm not gonna let this guy destroy me. So I'm gonna go in there and make him laugh, and we'll see what happens. And once in a while it works. Once in a while it doesn't. But some people just don't like you. It's one of the things you got to accept in the creative field.
Yeah, I think in any field really as well, isn't it? Listen, with comedy, like I would imagine there's a big barrier. I mean, it's a barrier for most people anyway, is judgment, right? Is they don't stand on stage, they don't show up, they don't express themselves perhaps authentically in the way they want with that level of comfort that you've just described on stage, because of fear of judgment. Now, at some point on your journey that you must have had to maybe had some kind of conflict there, or perhaps something you had to overcome there. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
100%. Well, like you said it before, like it's when we were talking about anxiety and excitement, it's about the narrative, right? So like getting over judgment, it's a lot about getting over the narrative as well. Like I used to, so when I started doing comedy, like I said, I came from Alberta in Canada, which is more like blue collar working class kind of place. So now I live in Toronto, which is like big city metropolitan, so it's very different audiences. So like when I was coming up in that blue collar world, like I was doing a lot of road shows where this is how I was learning to be a comedian. But you go to a lot of places where I don't know, I felt sometimes, and I put this narrative in my head sometimes where it's like, oh no, like this crowd is like really, it's like an older crowd, it's all white, like none of these people are going to connect with me. And like sometimes I would just have this shit in my head, just this narrative that I'll just go on stage and bomb because like I put that on myself. I told them. But like I got like over time, I kind of got to the point where I understood that like I was self-sabotaging so many of my sets because I was looking at the audience and prejudging them. But it's like, no, like at first it's like you have to just like go into a crowd and just like be like, you don't know what's gonna happen. Let's see where this goes. And really you get that attitude, because sometimes you'll be surprised. Like I've done that where it's like I went to a crowd which is like average age, like over 60, and I'm like, I'm in my 20s at the time, and like I went and had like the best show ever. And then I would go and do a show with like guys in their 20s, and like sometimes I would be like, oh, I'm gonna kick my ass, these guys are gonna love me, and like just go and they hated me. So it's like, yeah, you never know. But like the audience judgment is just like, yeah, like I think even in that sense, it's like the audience judgment's like a stress response. Like when you're talking about a stress response in your body, what do we do like in these spiritual practices? We learn to like not respond to it, right?
Yeah.
So like it's like judgment in an audience. Well, what we do with judgment, it's like you learn to not respond to it, because it's just something that's part of the game. It's gonna be there forever. Like you're never getting rid of it. So you just have to learn not to respond to it.
Yeah, it's a combination of like surrender and acceptance, isn't it? I think
Mhm.
something really insightful that you said there, though, which I think I really want our listeners to hear, is that obviously the way I was kind of thinking when I asked you the question was about you feeling judged by the audience. But interestingly, the thing that you brought it back to is how you actually prejudged the audience, right? How it was coming from within you, that whole judgment in the first place. And I think if we can all stop judging as best we can, right? I mean, we are wired somewhat to make judgment, right? It keeps us safe in many ways. But that level of prejudgment, I think, is very heavily linked to that surrender and acceptance, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's, again, the more we judge, or kind of get affected by judgment, that whole concept of surrendering and just letting go, it's that big conflict inside, isn't it? And it's important to know that, as you said, judgment is a natural part of life, but it depends how we're judging and what kind of context we're judging in. Like you said, like you judging a crowd for going in, like your audience before you even stepped on stage, knowing who they are, just judging based on appearance. You don't know what's going to happen. Like you don't know what's going on in their head. You don't know why they've come, what their expectations are. So that can limit your ability to perform at your best. Whereas if you just let it go and let it flow, so I'm just going to go out there and do my best and really just go with the flow, go with whatever happens. You start to sense, like you said earlier, you start to sense the energy from the audience, and you start to say, okay, who am I connecting with here? Who am I not connecting with? How can I shift this? How can I connect with everyone? And you start to play with it and start to shift those energies around until, like you said, you've got the whole audience, maybe bar one or two people. He said there's always one or two. But the funny thing is, those one or two people, they're going to be influenced either way. Even if they don't laugh or they're there and they are not really into it, they're influenced either way. So, and I think that's such the power of just letting go and being yourself, by being your true self and stepping out into that, out onto the stage, speaking to people, instead of prejudging, think, oh, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, I should say this, or maybe what if this happens, and just going, screw it, I'm just going to go out there, be me, do me, and see what happens.
Yeah, and I wish it was like that easy. It wouldn't have taken me so long to figure it out, because like honestly, it's exactly like meditation. It's like learning to let go and just be, and like think about trying to learn your meditation practice in front of 200 people. Like it's not too fun, right? Because it's like that's like the best I'm doing in comedy is when I let go and just be and like feel the audience. So now it's like a dance, because like my energy and their energy have to kind of combine, and that's like now we're just kind of going back and forth, and that's when the best comedy and best connection, like the best, like the most fun we have on stage is when I'm in that rhythm. But that's so hard to do, or it took me so long to like be able to get into that, because I'm such an analytical guy, so I'm constantly in my head going like making calculations, going like, okay, this joke works, so this joke will be great, and like, I should switch over to this, and like I'm just constantly making every calculation. So like I had to really like learn to like just shut that part up, and it's like, and it's not completely shut up, but I just don't pay attention to it. I don't let it grip me anymore. And because if you don't get that feel with the audience, the quality of the show goes down so much. And I think that's like what the majority of comedians, like that's the path they're on, is like learning to be able to just be on stage, just be. And it's, you know.
Do you feel fully authentic when you're on stage? Does it feel like you, or has there ever been this whole kind of like wearing a bit of a mask and showing up and partly?
Yeah. Like honestly, like the one thing I realized is like how many masks we have. Like it, like that's like the one thing. So like I constantly like shed a mask and I go like, I'm at my authentic self, and then I realize like, no, it's not authentic at all. Like, not, like so it's like one thing I realized is like we're just filled with masks, and like we just go like kind of peel it down like an onion. It's just another layer of authenticity. But like yeah, like you get more authentic the more you go. And yeah, like one thing I realized is never let go like this is my authentic self, because that's just ego kind of saying like you're here, you arrived, when it's like you're never arriving. It's a constant kind of process of like stripping those away.
What have been some of the most powerful things that you've learned on your spiritual journey that have helped you, not just in comedy, but just in your life in general? I know we've already touched on a few bits of gold there already, but is there any key things that you can share?
Yeah, like I said, I've been working with like ayahuasca for the last like 6 7 years. So I've been doing it. I basically do like a couple ceremonies every year. And like when I first went down to Peru into like the Amazon and like worked with some tribes, and then like I found some people in Canada who do it. So like that's been like something that's like really just opens up like parts of myself that really helped me. But like I think when I first went down to the Amazon, it was the first time like it like opened up gratefulness in my body, and like I felt it like reverberate through like every part of my body. And it really kind of showed me how selfish I was in my life, and like in my like even in comedy and like all of that stuff, like it was just always about me. But like just opening up that like spiritual energy of gratefulness and like feeling it through every part of my body, it really made me like understand like how powerful that energy is, and like how like and also how weak like just living selfishly can be. Like I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, you know, I'm a comedian, so like my whole life is like I get up in the morning and I try to write like every morning for like an hour or two. And like it's just like, you know, it's like go and like get this discipline going so I can write, and then I go and perform my jokes at night to like build up a set. And like, you know, that becomes a very selfish thing sometimes. It's just like everything's about myself. And like I kind of like realize like I'm like, I can't be living like that, because there's no joy in that. Like even like I like even if I get success, like if I'm not sharing it with people, there's nothing. So like that was one like really big insight to me. And like when I really was able to like what you call it, like bring that into my body and like let that be in my body, I was like, okay, now I need to like help other comedians. So it's like when I get my skills and I get to another level, I have to like go and find other comedians that are at a lower level and bring them up. When I get opportunities, I got to give those to other comics who could use those opportunities to get better. It's like those are the kind of things. And it's like now when like I get people who are starting, like now that I'm in Toronto, like I'm starting to get like a little bit of a fans, like people who come to my shows all the time. And now it's not like just being like, oh yeah, thanks for coming, blah. Like now it's like, no, get to like know your fans, where they're from, like be engaged. And like so like that, I think that's like always definitely been like the biggest like insight in my life, is like just that switch of like understanding like how selfishly I'm living. Because that's one thing in spirituality I think people don't understand. It's like it can become extremely selfish, where it's like, oh, I gotta every day wake up, do some meditation, get some breath work, and then I'm gonna eat properly. And then it's like, and it's just like, okay, it's like everything's for you. Like, what the heck happens to, like, you know, the rest of your world, your community, your partner, your family, like friends, like I think, like, because I was like into spirituality so much, there was like a level of selfishness there that I needed to address, and like I'm still addressing it. It's not like it's like a constant practice, that one too, right?
I think I think what you said there is kind of one of the biggest, I say, kind of swings on the pendulum, go from one extreme to the next, is find kind of spirituality, do these practices, and like you say, they go so far to the other side, which is I've got to do this, I'm going to shut everything else out. But it comes back to that question: is why are you doing this? And yeah, the thing, the kind of old saying about you've got to work on yourself to be able to give back and really show up for your loved ones and people around you. But first of all, you need to, what's your intention for doing these practices? Like, why are you going down this route? Are you being selfish to be able to have the capacity to be selfless, or are you being selfish because you think, no, I've got to focus on me and me alone, screw everyone else? And I think that's a big thing. Which I've seen when I started my journey, kind of a self-development, is those kind of pitfalls of, oh, I need to focus on me, and then you get to the point, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, but why am I doing it? Why? What's the intention behind it? Am I doing it just because this is what I'm supposed to do, or am I doing it so I do have that energetic capacity to be able to then, great, okay, I've worked on me, I've done me. Now I've got like a complete empty cup now to go out and give, and help as many people as I can. And by the end of the day, I've still got energy to for myself. Whereas a lot of people have it can't go from one extreme to the next. Whereas I want to keep all the energy for myself, or I'm giving everything to everyone else. I'm not doing anything for myself, and I'm burning out. So I think it's definitely knowing why you're doing what you're doing, which is so important, and not just, like you said, just doing it because it's something we should be doing.
And like, yeah, I noticed, like, even that whole idea of trying to give all that energy to yourself, that doesn't work.
No.
You're not like, there's not a lot of energy and like selfish acts. That's not,
it goes back to, isn't it, like you got to fill up your own cup before you can pour into others. So there's obviously that part of it from getting your basic needs met. Otherwise you can't show up for others perhaps with that same level of fulfillment and service. But I find it so interesting what you said, because I feel like what comedians do is so selfless. I feel like it's such a beautiful experience, because you're on the receiving end, and obviously, you know, we're the stress guys, so we talk a lot about stress relief. So, and one of the best things around to relieve stress is laugh, right?
It's so, like, one of the most scientifically proven kind of methods of relieving stress and changing your state, and it makes you feel so good. And that's why, like, comedians, like, at some point, kind of like healers at some point. You gotta go down that route. Obviously, we don't like using labels and all that crap, but they are, because when you've had a stressful day,
I'll take healer.
Comedic healer.
Yeah, comedic healer. Yeah, but laughter is such a powerful healer, and it's shown many times. And people who are suffering with so many different ailments and conditions, is laughter. It's the age-old saying of laughter is the best medicine, because it's shown to really help mind-body connection, but that healing and repairing effect on stress, anxiety, depression, physical ailments, physical pain, tension in the body. It helps to start to relieve that as well. So laughter is such a big part. We love watching comedy shows, stand-up comedy, movies. We love having that full-on laughing fits in that. It's such a great feeling.
Do you see yourself as a bit of a comedy healer in what you do?
No. Like, I know 100% what you're talking about, the laughter, and like how it, like, I see it on stage sometimes when, like, when you get somebody in that laughing fit where they're just like, and like it's just like they can't control it. It's like, you know, it's almost like an orgasm. You're like, I gotcha. Like it's just like it's completely uncontrollable, and where they're just like, yeah, I love that. Like when I see that, like that's a great like feeling myself to just be like, yeah. Then like honestly, like that whole idea of like, yeah, you're giving people laughter, and like that's like such a gift kind of thing, and like very selfless, and like I agree. And I think like in comedy, like I think most of us comedians, like the first few years we're getting into it, it's just kind of like, you know, when we hear the laughter, it's making us feel good, so we're kind of focused on that. But like you're right, it's like when you get more like present and more like seeing what's actually occurring when you're doing like a great show, it's like, yeah, it's better to like kind of look at what's happening with the crowd and be like feeling good for the crowd, and like kind of seeing that. Because like, yeah, like I said, like I think most of us comics, like we do come into this with like a lot of egoic parts of us, like just being like, you know, myself too, like I love getting the admiration from the crowd. I love the idea of like, oh, I could, you know, make money at this, and like maybe I'll get some sort of fame, maybe I'll get like, you know, all the shit that comes with that. Like I'm not gonna lie, that idea has always been in my head, and like the older I get, it's definitely silenced a little bit, but it's still there. And like you gotta like kind of balance that out. But like, yeah, like sometimes you feel like when I was earlier in my career, you feel that energy from the crowd, and you had a great show, and it kind of gives you this like, oh, I'm going to be so great, and like you kind of get into that mindset. But now it's like, yeah, I'm really trying to be like, no, like the crowd was awesome, and I'm so happy like for them and like for myself, and it's just like kind of, it's a different kind of buzz that you get afterwards now, which is I think it's a little bit more healthy. And yeah, I still gotta like kind of like deal with that stuff as well, because that's also a continuous process. I think like anything, like
It all
all
is.
of our spirit, yeah, all of our
Yeah.
like life is like a continuous process. So like but it is true, like it's better to look at it like that, like, hey, like the audience is laughing and this really helps them, and that does feel good, because I've had people come up to me after a show, and like you can tell they've been through something like really traumatic in the last little while, and then they came, and then they come up to, they're like, holy shit, like I just haven't laughed in so long, and like you just opened the floodgates. And yeah, from doing ayahuasca too, like ayahuasca, like, I don't know if you ever heard of like purging on ayahuasca.
Yeah.
That's like it's basically, a lot of times people notice with puking, they say, oh, you puke, but it's like really an energy release. But like I've had every kind of energy release on the ayahuasca, and it's just like they do parts of your body. So laughing's a big one. Like when you get into that, like an uncontrollable laugh, especially if like you're somebody who had a traumatic event and haven't been able to have like a real laugh for a while, when you get that like laugh, it's like a energy release, and like you come out of it and you're just like, oh my god, like I feel lighter, I can feel the energy surging through my body. And like, yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So like, no, I understand that. And like I said, like it's about the narratives in your mind. Like I need to focus more on those kind of things too. Because like, yeah, you can like easily get have a good show and be focused more on yourself, like, yeah, I'm so good.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But like you said, you want to balance it as best you can.
Yeah.
Is there any are there any kind of hidden things that perhaps like us regular folk don't know about, like the life of a comedian, that is actually really tough, and perhaps that our listeners could relate to in their own ways?
Well, like every comedian bombs. Like we bomb on stage, and we were faced a rejection of a whole crowd. Like, and like it get like the more you do it, like it's less. Like I don't bomb too much anymore. I might have a bad show where it's like, oh man, I just didn't connect with the crowd. But like, yeah, I don't bomb that much anymore. Like it's very rare. but I'm still going to bomb. I know like it's coming up eventually. Like it's just you go to a show, they just don't like you, or the crowd isn't like it's a small crowd, or and like whatever it is. It's 1,000 different reasons it can happen. But like we're doing shows almost every night for the most part. So yeah, like that's part of it. And it's like it can be really rough. Like when I started, like the first like 5-6 years of doing comedy, when I bombed like so badly, it's just like that's a traumatic experience. And then like sometimes I don't want to do comedy for like a week or two. Like it's just like I just can't get back on stage because it's just like it hits you so hard. So like yeah, I don't know. I think that's a big part. That's one thing. I think most people kind of know that a little bit, though. What else would it be? Like yeah, I don't know. Like can't think of anything off the top of my head.
No, I think the that level of rejection is something everybody can experience on some level. I'm sure exactly that level.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you come back from that? Like you said, perhaps having a bit of a break from it, but how do you get back on stage after such a incident?
It's like it's a little bit of acceptance and honestly, yeah, like we like a lot of us end up getting a traumatic response from that. Like I remember I bombed in front of my hometown Christmas party. And it's just like not fun. Like, so I'm going back to my hometown, and like it's a small town, so everyone kind of knows each other. And I went and did this show, and I just had a bad set. And like, this was also like years ago, so I wasn't that like good of a comic either. I didn't know how to like turn around a bad set, and I had to do like 45 minutes in front of them. So like think about going up for 45 minutes and like just not doing well. And like this is my hometown and stuff. Like that like left a traumatic, like that was a traumatic experience for me. And like I did feel like a stress response of anxiety and like tenseness in my body sometimes when I thought about like, oh, I have to do a corporate show, and then all of a sudden my chest gets tight and I can feel some anxiety. So like, a lot of us get trauma from those events. Like I think like I'm happy like I have like a spiritual life where I can like look at the trauma and like actually deal with it and try to heal it and all of that stuff. Like sadly most comedians don't have a spiritual life, and they just end up doing the same. And like a lot of us end up drinking too much because drinking calms down that anxiety response and that stress response. And like I used to do it too. Luckily I'm mostly sober right now, which is great. Like because I don't need drinks to go on stage, but like I know a lot of comics who do. And it's kind of sad, but it's like we get a trauma response from like that level of rejection, that sometimes it's like we need a couple drinks to like calm that out so we can go back on stage. But like that's a very unhealthy pattern to get into. So it's kind of sad when you see us kind of get into it. Like it's a tough business, but it's a doable business. But I really do think having a spiritual life in comedy is so like it's just something that's so good for you. All my friends in comedy who have that a little bit of spirituality, they do way better. And it doesn't have to be our kind of spirituality. Like I know a lot of friends who like get into like some sort of sports, like like martial arts and stuff. And that really channels a lot of their energies and like allows them to become more present, and then they can deal with those kind of trauma responses a lot better, right?
Absolutely. So what are your kind of go-to spiritual practices that help keep you grounded and help keep you in balance?
So like one thing I started doing last year, which has just been a game changer for me, it's like every morning I wake up and like I call it the morning pages. It's from this book, The Artist's Way. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's a book that kind of talks about creativity and spirituality. It's a beautiful book for anybody who's like in a creative field. But like basically it's every morning I wake up and I just write 3 pages. Like it's like pretty much like a journal, but like it's just like I never not do that. Like it doesn't matter where I am, I wake up and I write those 3 pages. And that's a very grounding practice for me. It also like really just makes me understand what happened yesterday, what I'm doing today, just really gets everything organized. And like when you do it over a long period of time, your mind becomes very organized, and you become like a lot more intentional with everything in your life, is because you can kind of see everything in your life, where you're going, where you're coming from, and all of that stuff. And it lets you deal with like you know, if you did have like a really bad show like the night before, or like, you know, or you had like any other kind of bad experience, like first thing in the morning, you can write about it and kind of process it a little bit more rather than let it fester. And you know, meditation 100% like just always been like a huge part of my life. Breath work, I was doing a lot of breath work maybe a couple years ago, and it was really really good to like deepen my meditation and get me into like deep states. I kind of stopped it a little bit, like I have been getting like kind of rushes of anxiety coming back lately, and that's mostly just because of like dealing with stuff in my family life. I've just been like having like some like stressful issues there, and like one thing I've noticed with breath work, especially the type of breath work I do more fast breathing, so it like fills me with energy and stuff. But that also releases adrenaline and kind of gets that anxiety response going as well.
Yeah.
So like I'm like I can't like yeah, it's like it's not smart to like kind of be dealing with
Yeah.
anxiety and like doing like that breath work that brings it on. So that's not the yeah, so like I kind of cut back on the breath work. I do a little bit of like slow breathing, like once the one if like I want to like calm down my anxiety a bit. But yeah, besides that, like yeah, it's a writing and meditation are my favorites. And like just like getting the discipline of like write. So I do my 3 pages of morning pages, and then after that, like I do like an hour to an hour and a half of like actual like just writing and just getting my comedy down. And yeah, like getting that discipline has just been like just really grounding for me. It's just been really nice, and it just gets your creativity flowing every day at the same time, and just like yeah, that's been like really helpful for me. Yeah.
I'm a big believer in journaling. Same as you, find it very, very grounding. That clarity that it brings is just so powerful for me. Um, One thing I'd actually love to ask you is, I know obviously as a comic you're like writing and you're creating your sets. How much writing do you have to do to create like a kick-ass set? Like, because I think sometimes people just expect in everyday life, and we've been the same, it's like we want that instant start writing, we want it to be good straight away, and the life of a comic is like, give us the real
Yeah.
life of it.
Oh yeah, no. You like honestly, I bet you would have to write 10 pages to get like a good like 30-40 seconds of material. Like it's just like everything gets cut down. Like the whole process of comedy is like write, and like cut it down. So like when I get a new joke and I'm like, oh rad, I wrote something good. I love this idea. I got a bunch of like different punchlines. I got a good idea, a bit here. And then I go try it out on stage. And I usually go to like a smaller show where you know, where it's like a workshop kind of show, and I go try it out, and then I can like go like, okay, like most of that didn't really hit too well, but there was a couple gems in there. So I'm going to take that out, kind of like get rid of the rest of it, and then start writing around that. So it's like a constant like write and then shorten, write and then shorten. And like yeah, so that's why it's like really good to keep writing. And one thing I do, it's like if I write a bit, I rewrite that bit constantly. That's why like in the morning, like I say, I write for like an hour and a half. Like I'll write that the same bit again, but like at that constant writing it, it gets it in my head. So it's constantly flowing around in my head. So like I don't know if you ever heard of the idea, like a lot of creativity happens when you're not writing or not working. Like it'll happen when you're sleeping or something, like new connections will be made kind of thing. So it's like get those bits in your head, and then like yeah, then you're just constantly writing them, adding to them, taking away from them. And like that's how you make a set really polished, because yeah, the best sets, like the best comedians, like when you go and watch them, like you're laughing all the time. Like it's not like when you're telling a joke at a pub or something. You can't like give like a minute long setup for like one punchline at the end. It's like no one will sit down and watch that for an hour. But like yeah, you have to have like a flow. You have to have constant laughter, and you got to keep people engaged. So it's like your writing has to be constantly like upgraded, and it just happens like over time. You just get better at all of those, because like writing's one aspect, but like now when you're trying to keep people engaged, like you have to be up speaking to them, and like you have to be present with them, because like keeping people engaged means you have to be engaged with them. So you can't be in your head being like, oh, what did I write today? So it's like two different kind of processes coming together, right?
Yeah, I I really hope our listeners are hearing that effort and that stuff that goes on behind the scenes, because it can be too easy to see the polished finished article sometimes and to not see all of that hard work. And I think in a world of instant gratification, real high performance still requires work. It still requires that effort and pouring that passion in and learning skills and practice. And I think sometimes people get so stressed out because they're not as far along as they wish they could be, and that in itself creates a stress, and they're anxious about being stressed because they're not there yet, and then it just feeds this vicious cycle.
And I've dealt with that exact stress you're talking about, and everyone does like that. And like I think because we live in such a capitalist society, like capitalist world now, I don't think there's any country where you're not seeing that kind of like everyone's kind of taught like you need to, like, why aren't you that far ahead now? So everyone has that feeling, like, and I've noticed that it doesn't matter. Like I freaking like sometimes I look at comics that I look up to, and like just because like I'm in a big city now, I'm friends with some of these guys that I look up to, and then I talk to them, and you see like they're having the same feelings where they're looking up at other comics, and they're just like, God damn, like this shit doesn't end. So it's like yeah, you can't be like you can't have that stress of not being where you're at. It's like the one thing is it's like it's just the practice. If you're going to go into any creative field, especially because creative fields the money takes longer to get to. So if you're ever going into any creative field, you have to surrender to the practice. It's like if you don't do that, you're freaking gonna be giving or causing yourself so much suffering. It's like you have to surrender to the practice and just like learn to enjoy it, which is something I'm like so grateful that I could like wake up and start writing, and I'm excited to do that. And that's like and it took me a long time to get to that point. And like so like I think people need to understand that like once you get to that point where it's like right now I feel like I'm at a stream where it's like starting to come out, but like I always look at it like boiling water. I know like Chinese philosophy has this kind of thing, but it's like when you're boiling water, like think about all the fire you're putting into that water at first, and there's no bubbles coming out. You know, like that's like when you're creating, it's the same way. You're putting all this fire into the water, and then a bubble comes out. You're like, oh, a bubble, but you're like, is this how much fire I'm going to be putting into it? But like eventually you get that water boiling, and then like you don't have to put that much fire, and the bubbles are just coming out. So it's like that's the kind of place you want to get with your creativity. But like I said, surrender to the process, or you're gonna be feeling suffering all the time.
Yeah, definitely. It's just knowing that you are where you need to be right now, and like you said, the more you surrender, the more you just accept and enjoy the process, and stop kind of trying to live in the future to get to whatever the so-called end goal is. Then you, like you said, you'll stop that suffering and you start actually enjoying what you're doing more. So yeah, just live in the now, be present, and just enjoy it. So Noor, before we do kind of let you go and kind of wrap everything up, is there anything else that you feel you'd like to share with our audience? Any kind of final words of wisdom, anything you think they really need to hear from you?
yeah, like yeah, like I don't know. I think like what I was just saying, like right now with the surrender to the process, like I'll just add to that. It's like you were talking like you know, like how like a comedian might go like, oh, where am I? Why am I not there? Like, but like we all deal with that feeling and that comparison thing. There's like so much suffering in that. And like as a comedian, I've had to like really deal with that a lot, and I still do. But I'm not as bad as I used to be at that. But like yeah, like understanding comparisons, it's so hard, like it's so bad for the soul. It's just so bad for the soul, and it like kills your energy. It puts you in like like just crap your spaces in your body and stuff, and like it causes trauma to like energy to stay stagnant in your body, so like that causes problems down the road too. So it's like you can't do that. Like you have to get out of that comparison mindset. And like honestly, if you can get that gratefulness and like when you can look at somebody who you're sometimes jealous of, and like start going like you can do this in meditation, like a loving kindness meditation, kind of go like, oh, like, you know what, I'm happy for this person, good for them, I wish them the best, that kind of thing. And if you can slowly get your mind to kind of start looking at people like that, that I think brings so much more peace into your life. And I think it brings more like I don't know if I want to say prosperity, but like when you're in a better energy, better things will come to you. And like I really do feel that.
Yeah, definitely. We
Absolutely.
definitely believe that too. You show up, your energy is different, you start like attracts like, right, as well. And you can be more resourceful as well, because you're not being consumed by this low vibrational energy that doesn't really belong, you know. So yeah, beautiful words of wisdom to end on there. Noor, could you please tell us a little bit more about your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is called God, Yay or Nay. And yeah, the tagline of it is grow, transform, become. And like that's basically like my whole world. It's like trying to get better, trying to change myself, transform into the person I want to become. And so that's kind of like what the whole thing is. So I talk a lot, like I talk to a lot of people about psychedelics. A lot of like people talk about their ayahuasca experiences, or like I've talked to some shamans about like what actually happens, or like how their like whole philosophy of like how they heal you on there. I talked to a lot of different authors of, you know, some psychologists all the way to like people who are very spiritual. I know you guys are going to be coming on in a couple months, so like yeah, like it's all about growing, transforming, becoming, and just like really learning to become your best self. So God, yay or nay, that's the one.
Beautiful. We'll make sure the links are in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So people can come and find you for sure.
I appreciate that.
Definitely. What's the best place for people to reach out to you at if they want to find more about your work and listen to your comedy as well?
You can probably check me out on Instagram at Noor Kidwai. My website's noorkidwai.com. Yeah, you can check that out too for like dates and stuff. I'm going to be in Canada for the next like year probably, working on my new album. So like yeah, like if you're in Canada, I don't know how many listeners you got out there, but if you're in Canada, yeah, awesome. Yeah, like you can check out my dates, and maybe I'll be hitting up your town.
I love that.
Awesome. Good. Well, yeah, we'll put all the links in there so people can easily find you, find your dates, and everything about you, and start following you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us, Noor. There's so much wisdom and insights in there, and I think like I know we really appreciate everything that you've shared, and I've no doubt our listeners will too. So thank you so much for not only the work that you're doing on yourself, but the laughs that you're bringing, the message that you're bringing the conversation of spirituality as well onto your podcast. What more can you ask for?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for having me. I loved it.